Hello, everybody. This is Pimpine News Network, and I'm Daniel Dibaba. In our today's program, we'll have a continuation of our yesterday's program on Oromia Support Group's report number 66. Today, I have an honorable guest, Dr. Trevor Trueman from United Kingdom. Dr. Trevor is the chairperson of Oromia Support Group. Stay with us until the end of our program. Welcome, Dr. Trevor. Thank you for coming and joining 15 News Network this early morning.
We're going to get to it then.
All right. So, Dr. Trevor, you issued the Oromia Support Group number 66 this week. And in your summary that you sent along with the report, you stated that the Ethiopian government, security forces, Ethiopian National Defense Force, and the Fano militant groups have killed over 5,575 Oromo civilians. And you detailed and included a number of hard evidences and the photos of the victims along with the report. Can you a bit summarize the report and give us some context about the human rights violations that's being perpetrated by the Ethiopian National Defense Forces and Amhara militants?
Yeah, there are basically two forces at work. Both of them evil, and both of them responsible for huge numbers of killings of innocent civilians. The ENDF forces operating from command posts have continued to target young men, the Kero, and also we have drying out the ocean to kill the fish, performed by the ENDF. Anywhere that the Oromo Liberation Army is active, they attack innocent civilians in retaliation for any battlefield losses with the Oromo Liberation Army. And in addition, we have very cruel and barbaric killings performed by the Fano militants operating not only in Amhara region against the Oromo in Wollo, but also in adjacent regions of Oromia. Basically all the zones of Shoa and Horogudru and East Wallaga especially. Having said that, more latterly, the majority of killings in Horogudru and East Wallaga have been from ENDF forces rather than Fano. But Fano are still doing their awful work. One particularly atrocious event was the killing of a wedding party in Nonno in North Shoa on the 14th of June. And this typifies the way that Fano work. They're not fighters really. They're killers of civilians. And I don't want to denigrate the people, but it sickens me to hear these people described as freedom fighters who are preventing genocide of Amharas, and when they are brutally massacring innocent civilians in Oromia. This was a wedding party, and Fano militants locked these people in a hall, threw in at least one hand grenade, set the place on fire, and then shot people dead as they tried to escape. At least 20 were burnt to death, and at least 4 were shot dead. Other people, some informants claim there were 31 killed, but we know for definite 24 are killed. And the gruesome photographs of the charred remains of some of those burnt to death are in the report. I apologize for the gruesome nature of some of the pictures that I include in the report, but it is shocking events, and I believe the world has to be informed the degree of brutality that is done in the name of freedom fighting. It's we all have sympathy with the wishes of the people of Amhara region, and nobody wants their freedom to be taken away. Nobody wants their human rights to be abused. But we should be working with them to bring down this government, not fighting each other and killing each other in such a brutal fashion. It seems that the Fano justify their activities because they claim that Oromo and others are out to get them, but that's just not the case. And we want equality and equal treatment. We don't want to take anybody else's patch. We don't want to take anybody else's resources or land. But peaceful coexistence is what the Oromo want. And to cry genocide and claim that Oromo are trying to destroy Amhara, which academics even claim, is totally wrong, and it really disinforms the public at large. Amharas are killing themselves and justifying their brutality by claiming that they're being attacked and destroyed. And this is unfortunately believed by a lot of people. You hear people in meetings in the USA claiming there's genocide and thousands of Amharas are massacred by Oromo forces, and it's just not true. And to equate the ENDF with Oromo aspirations is ridiculous. I mean, it's the ENDF that are causing a lot of the havoc and killing of Oromo people, as I say, the Kero whole generation, and clearances of people from areas where Ola is active, especially North Shoa and West Shoa, for example. So yes, two forces of evil that are affecting Oromo civilians. That's basically the summary of what's going on, and that we've reported in Report 66. Also, there is coverage of the murder of Bate Urgesa, which was a great shock, and it is still having ripple effects. He was such a brilliant and good man, and a force for peace in Ethiopia, and a force for reconciliation between the different peoples of Ethiopia. And it's such a tragic loss that he should be targeted by the security forces and assassinated in the way he was. The other thing that we've concentrated on in the report is the treatment of refugees. Refugees in Egypt, not just Oromo refugees there, but Sudanese and people from Palestine are being abused and treated awfully, and Sudanese have been taken over the border and dumped back in Sudan. But in Somaliland, we have a resurgence of deportations. And I hear, just as after we went to press, that the immigration police in Somaliland are doing house-to-house searches. And they will not only be deporting undocumented migrants, they will be sending back to Ethiopia people who are registered as asylum seekers and people who've got refugee mandate status. Although that's very difficult to get these days, there are still hundreds with refugee status in Hargeisa who will be at risk of deportation. And also half a dozen people I know of in Djibouti are being sought by immigration police with a view to deportation. So I've been particularly interested in the fate of refugees, as you probably are aware from other reports that we've done. We interviewed people in Egypt, Djibouti, Somaliland, Kenya, South Africa. And while I am very ashamed of the way Europe is treating refugees, the fate of refugees in countries surrounding Ethiopia is much worse, really. And that's something that really offends me. The fact that people have nowhere to flee when they're being persecuted or fleeing from conflict. So that was a rather long answer to a very short question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trevor. Just for our viewers, Dr. Trevor Trueman has been with the Oromia Support Group for several years, beginning from around the 1990s. And Dr. Trevor have been advocating for the rights of the Oromo refugees in Sudan and Egypt and the Horn of Africa. And he's been regularly compiling and reporting the human rights abuses that the Oromo civilians face at the hands of successive Ethiopian government forces and currently the Fano militants. And I would like to thank on behalf of human rights defenders and the Oromo citizens, the victims' families and friends for the work that you do. Just recently, you presented, you submitted document to the UN Universal Periodic Review of Ethiopian human rights situation. Can you update us about that? And you also included and mentioned in the current report.
Yeah, and we've published these submissions in full on the OSG website. The Universal Periodic Review Mechanism has requested that we alter those submissions so that names are not included. And we have changed that in the submissions that will be published, I hope, by the UN. And we still don't know whether they've been accepted by the UN, but the submissions as they went in originally are on the OSG website. And there's 30 pages of summary of abuses under the current regime since 2018. And the periodic review covers the years from 2019 onwards. And in fact, I think it was June 2019 when we resumed writing reports because of the degree of atrocities performed under the rule of Abiy Ahmed. And since then, we've done 16 reports, and in fact, it's 17 with the last one. And the Universal Periodic Review, our submissions are really a condensed form of those 17 reports. And what I've already described is it forms the meat of the submissions, the killings, the torture, rape, the ethnic cleansing, which is instigated violence stimulated by the government, really, between one group and another. Amhara and Oromo have not been fighting. The populations haven't been fighting against each other. as a perpetual thing. This has been really instigated and fueled by the Prosperity Party, by Abiy Ahmed. He's armed Fano against Oromo. He's armed everybody against Oromo. But the inter-ethnic violence, as we've described as ethnic cleansing, is a construct of the Ethiopian government. It's I believe that ordinary Amhara people and ordinary Oromo people have coexisted peacefully for centuries in areas where the Oromo and Amhara villages, but it's been deliberately fomented by the NDF. Anyway, so this is what the UPR has done, and we're hoping that there'll be some meetings later in the year and next year when we can talk about these atrocities actually in Geneva. But we await to be invited to one meeting, and we have to apply to go to another meeting of the Human Rights Council.
Thank you, Dr. Trevor. So how's your report being distributed at this point? Are there media interest and to further expose the evil brutality of the Ethiopian National Defense Force, Ethiopian government, and the Fano Amhara militants? Have you submitted this report to the UK government, the Commonwealth, and how will it affect the view of democratic countries and European Union, European Commission, and Parliament? Are you distributing your report to those authorities? What would be the implication of this report in terms of the view about the Ethiopian government as well as the Fano militants? And with that, I would also would like you to touch upon the Amhara people living in the West, especially in the US. You stated about two Amhara elites who recently issued a statement in support of the Fano militants, saying that Fano is fighting for the rights of the Amhara people. What do you make of that? And you stated their recent statement, and so it's contradicting. They say the Fano militants are fighting for the rights, for the liberation and freedom of the Amhara people, but they are attacking civilians in Oromia outside their own state, and they have an ambition to control the capital. What do you make of that?
Yeah, and in terms of distributing the report, it is sent to people who influence the British government by OSG itself, but I rely on other organizations to use the report as a source of information to inform the US government, for example. We send it to one or two people at the UN, but as you know, as I just explained, the UPR, the Universal Periodic Review Mechanism, seems to be the best way of doing that, which we've done. International media, yes, I do send the report directly to reporters, but I don't hear back. I'm not offered interviews by any media. This is the only interview I've done as a result of the report. So my role really is to supply the information which other people then use to inform governments and media. And what effect it's had, I do not know. have seen a shift in opinion, a huge shift, and OSG has presumably contributed to that to some degree, but it's probably only a very small part. However, it is, I believe, a useful repository of information for people to refer back to. It's all on the Oromia Support Group website. The whole 66 reports are. But whether it's or however much it is related to what OSG has published, there have been huge shifts in opinion, and these are largely due to the activities of Abiy Ahmed and Fano themselves. You cannot look at the news in an objective way without realizing what's going on. And in Tigray, for example, the New Lines Institute investigation, which was a very thorough investigation of what happened in Tigray, has solidly come down saying that what's happened in Tigray is genocide. And they point fingers at all the belligerents there, including the TPLF, in terms of war crimes and crimes against humanity. But the international crime of genocide is laid at the feet of Amhara national forces, including Fano, and the ENDF and the Eritrean Defense Forces. And the report from the New Lines Institute justifies the use of the term genocide. So public opinion is shifting away from supporting Fano and shifting away from supporting Abiy Ahmed, the Nobel laureate. People are beginning to realize that he was given the Nobel Prize basically for cooking up a plan with Isaias Afwerki, so-called peace talks. But really he was cooking up a plan to destroy Tigray. And that's why he was given the Nobel Peace Prize, which is, irony is not the correct word. It's an atrocious thing. The media generally accept the fact that 500,000 civilians were killed in Tigray and 350,000 combatants. So getting on for 1 million people, and that's one sixth of the population of Tigray. So it's bound to affect world opinion. We're still getting the atrocities in Oromia still don't get the same reportage as those in other regions, and the well-connected Amhara sources are talking about atrocities in Amhara region, and they're still getting much more airtime than those in Oromia. And the attacks on civilians in reprisals for battlefield losses with Fano, for example, the drying out the ocean to kill the fish, getting rid of or having local reprisals for areas where Fano is active. This is exactly the same as happening in Oromia region, but you get a lot more media and airtime from the Amhara region because of the connections of people from that region. They've got much more of a voice in international human rights organizations, international media, and NGOs in general. Because people have been exported, Ethiopia has been exporting Amhara people for a lot longer than it has been exporting Oromo and other people from Ethiopia. So they're the ones with all the connections. But even so, as I said before, the opinion, world opinion is changing. We still get the rear guard, as I point out in the report. There's an academic paper by 2 PhDs in the States claiming that Fano is an organization that is fighting for justice for the Amhara people, fighting for their survival, and claiming that there is genocide against the Amhara people. So, whereas we have to have sympathy with what is happening in Amhara region, of course, but we must educate them and international media that what is happening is a result of their activities rather than the Oromo activities. They are, I think, the reason behind Fano and its support. Well, there are two really. One is people harking back to the days of dominance by Amhara culture over the whole of Ethiopia, and two, it's ignorance. It seems that Fano believe that everybody has this zero-sum attitude to power, and that you cannot compromise, you cannot share power with different groups, and there's a fear that will behave like Fano itself in terms of its brutality and zero-sum politics. But this is not the case. We want to reach out to Amhara people and say that we're all interested in the same thing, freedom and equality. And once the forces within Amhara region realize this, then we can get rid of the system that has been so bedeviling the whole population of Ethiopia for centuries.
Thank you, Dr. Trevor. Yeah, you rightfully described the Ethiopian government. Abiy Ahmed's regime has been brazen-faced, and they have no concern about the human rights situation in the Ethiopian empire. They have endorsed it. They have made it their policy to exterminate the Oromo people. They have spoken in the parliament, and they have been implementing that. And Internet News Network has previously received almost most of the content of your report. For example, I remember 9 members of a family in RC zone were this year brutally murdered by Ethiopian National Defense Forces, and they were left in the field for several days. And the Ethiopian government denying the families from burying the dead family members. So the Ethiopian government has been conducting this with impunity, with no regard for any criticism from human rights group, whether in Ethiopia and in Africa or elsewhere in the world. And they continue to do it. And there's a sense of who is going to hold me accountable. The Ethiopian government has been doing this and continues to do it without any fear of repercussion for what they are doing. The Fano have also been doing it. They mostly in Horogru zones in Wallo region, in North Shawa, in East Shawa zone, and Fantale, in Karayu areas. They have been doing the same. They have been committing similar acts of violence against unarmed Oromo civilians, and their barbaric acts, like you reported in Nono, in West Shawa zone, it can't be explained by any just cause for a struggle for freedom that the Amhara elite are supporting and funding. It can't be explained, it can't be justified by the Amhara people's desire for freedom. Any nation has a right to be free. Any nation has a right to be to defend itself. But what the Amhara militants are doing cannot be explained by that, especially when they go outside their own region and brutally attack peoples like the Oromo people in Wallo, North Showa, and all those other places. They command people, Agao people, and the Tigrayan people, the Benishangul Gumuz. They have animosity against most of the other national group that are contiguous with the Amara state or very close. And that cannot be justified by freedom. The people's pursuit of freedom, and it boggles me when the elite that are residing in Western democratic countries support those kind of activity. It doesn't advance their any pursuit for freedom. Killing civilians would enrage family members and relatives, and they would not be welcome in Oromia after doing when they do all those kind of things and they don't get any support from the Oromo people. And so I don't know why they continue to do this. And also the global reaction is at this point silent. There is no any external human rights organization besides the Oromia Support Group who is shedding light on what is going on, especially the acts of the Fano group and ENDF. Even though other human rights groups such as Human Rights report on Ethiopian National Defense Force atrocities, and I haven't seen them reporting much on Fano's activities against the Oromo people. One of the statements that came while reading your report is that you stated, Oromia Support Group stated, and the majority of people in Ethiopia support the Ethiopian government. Was that right? And do you remember putting that in your report? Do you believe majority of the Ethiopian people support the Ethiopian government?
No, I definitely do not. And I don't know how you got that impression from the report. I must have misphrased a sentence or whatever. But certainly, I think this is probably the most unpopular government Ethiopia has seen since that of Haile Selassie. It certainly, there is support by elites within every region, people who are put in positions of power and privilege because of their connection with the Prosperity Party, including some Oromo, including some former members of the Oromo Liberation Front. But the overwhelming majority of people in Ethiopia are certainly against the government. That's an absolute certainty. So I don't know how you might have got the impression that I said the majority of people support the government. There's a few things you said there about the Karayu. Although Fano was responsible for resettling the areas that the Karayu were expelled from, since then the ENDF and Fano have fought over the Karayu land, and the ENDF have expelled Fano and Amhara region forces from the Karayu area. This hasn't benefited the Karayu. They've been forced to they've been expelled to areas between Afar and Amhara region, to where they're living rough. Basically, half the population of the Karayu now are living rough, and they're away from the Karayu area. The lucrative trade route to east to Djibouti and Somaliland is vital for the government, and this is what the Amhara forces wanted to control. But with the Gada Special Economic Zone around Mojo, which they're hoping to develop, the trade from that and development from that, they want the Karayu to have no part of, and therefore they're being expelled from that area. There was something that you said about Fano that reminded me that they must be called out for being the racist and supremacist group that they are. We recounted some incidents in Amhara region against Agao people in the report, where people have been gathered together, and if they don't denounce their Agao nationality, if they don't renounce that and say we are Amhara, they're shot. And that is, well, that's just like Nazi Germany, isn't it? It's and yes, the atrocities committed by Fano have tended to be underplayed by international human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, I'm afraid to say, because of connections between Amhara people and Amnesty International. Until last year, the desk officer for Ethiopia was an Amhara, or related to Amhara, Fiseha Tekle. And since, I think, the middle of 2020, since the middle of 2020, when Hachalu was killed, there's been very little positive reporting by Amnesty about the Oromo. It's frequent now claim that the Oromo Liberation Army has been responsible for atrocities, for example. And atrocities by Fano have been underplayed, including the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. It's very quick to point the finger at Ola and very reluctant to point the finger at Fano. Yes, there's been a huge amount of bias there. And yes, please do not take it that I've claimed that the majority of the Ethiopian people support the regime of Abiy Ahmed. He's a very unpopular person indeed.
Thank you for that correction. Thanks so much. So in this report, you rightfully stated that the Amhara elites and of course the Fanos claim that they have lost dominance, and they attribute to the problem of the Ethiopian crisis to the current federal structure and the constitution of the country, and they are always looking for repealing the Ethiopian constitution and the federal structure and replace it with a unitary system. While they are saying that and pushing for that to happen, they don't hesitate to claim land from other regions. Even this self-contradicting, and they claim land from Western Tigray, Walqais, Agade, and Western Tigray, and they claim land in Oromia, and I believe that's why they are killing innocent Oromo civilians. Even this self-contradicting, while at the same time they are saying the problem of the Ethiopian empire is the current federal structure and the boundaries the constitution recognizes, and the regions, autonomy of the regions that's demarcated along national lines, language, and identities. Even this self-contradiction. And then the other question related to that is, what can we learn from the life in United Kingdom. UK is made from different autonomous state government. They have a lot of freedom. Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland, I guess, Wales, and you can tell us much better than I do. What can people learn from that? And can Ethiopian problem be attributed to the current federal structure and the autonomy that the people are demanding?
Well, I'd hesitate that you should take the UK as a good example. There have been problems in Northern Ireland for 300 years. And the last time we were invaded is over 1,000 years ago. And before that, for several hundred years, well, in fact, the 1,000 years before then, beginning with the Romans, we had waves of people coming and conquering and fighting and killing. So I don't want Ethiopia to waste another 1,000 years before people can live together in peace and harmony. So I wouldn't take the UK as a good example. What's happening now is better, but there's still an awful lot of bias and racism in UK society. And the problems in Northern Ireland are still there, but it is getting better than it was, yes. But I heard somebody commentate the other day saying that it took 300 years to get in the position that we're in now, and it'll take another 300 years for all those biases to be dissipated. And it's a very astute observation of yours that there's a contradiction between the Amhara wanting to return to a state of what they call where everybody was equal, or in fact they weren't, but a state of Amhara hegemony over the rest of Ethiopia, where Ethiopia is seen as only represented by Amhara, well, the Ethiopian Orthodox religion, and Amhara language and script and culture. And that contrasted to the territorial expansion of Fano, wanting to take over areas which they claim to be ancestral Amhara land, which is anti-historical. It is not a fact. There are, including areas where Amhara people resettled by the Derg, and saying that these are traditional Amhara areas. There was certainly a degree of truth in that the EPRDF, where they enacted revenge on Amhara people back in 1991, when the regional demarcation was made, they certainly did take areas that probably had predominant Amhara populations and absorbed those perhaps into Western Tigray. But I don't know enough about to be certain how much. Certainly the TPLF did take revenge on Amhara people, and they were subjugated and abused, and they did have some of their land taken away. But how much of that, I don't know. And certainly the claims being made now about areas of East Wallaga and Horoguduru, and areas of Benishangul Gumuz region, and other parts. And it's so obvious within Amhara region in Wollo, for example, where the people have been there for centuries as Oromo. Yes, the former Amhara region and influence may have been reduced by the TPLF, but not the areas that are being claimed by Fano as ancestral Oromo land. The Amhara supremacists have been saying that the whole of Wolaga and the whole of Shoa is Amhara land, and that the Oromos are only recent arrivals there, and that is anti-historical. That is just not true. You can read any of the books by Mohammed Hassan, and that will tell you that that's not the case. So, yeah, I think I've answered your questions there.
Yeah, thank you very much. In this report, Oromia Support Group's report number 66, you also described and highlighted the current situation in the Horn of Africa, in which you defined two forces that are at play. On one side, the Ethiopian government, the Somaliland, in United Arab Emirates, and Sudanese Rapid Support Forces. And on the other side, the Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Somalia, Turkey, and the likes. And how is this going to affect the stability in the Horn of Africa going forward? It looks like the Ethiopian government still has a very friction with Somalia, and is now trying to resolve the conflict that they are having on Ethiopia's recognition of Somaliland and signing of memorandum of understanding at the beginning of this year, and Ethiopia recently moving forward with it and settling some of its troops in some sea in Somaliland. What do you think? Where do you think this will take us, and in terms of regional stability and the geopolitical impact of these two sides?
I'm not an expert on international politics, but I see the influence of the United Arab Emirates as being not in the interests of the Ethiopian people, and they're trying to profit from the whole of Africa, really. They're investing in ports and in terms of getting resources from Ethiopia and other places. And I was very much influenced by writings of Professor Alex Duval, and the reference to the two blocks, one Saudi Arabia on one side and the UAE on the other side, with Turkey and Egypt and blah blah. And I was very much influenced by an article written by Professor Duval and one other person from Tufts when writing that bit in the introduction. The Ethiopian government there's never been an Ethiopian government since, well, even Menelik, that has not depended to some extent on outside forces. And Haile Selassie had the Americans and the British, and the Derg had the Russians and the Cubans, and EPRDF had the Americans and the Europeans. And it looks as though Abiy, now that the scales have fallen from the eyes of Western supporters, that he's getting support from the United Arab Emirates. And I'm not sufficiently informed to be able to predict what will happen in that respect. I think what we have to insist on is that Ethiopia stands on its own feet and is not dependent on outside forces. And once we get a truly representative democratic establishment in Ethiopia, where the people of Ethiopia decide their own affairs and who governs and how they're governed. Until that happens, then Ethiopia will be at prey to foreign powers. Ethiopia potentially could be, well, as was demonstrated under Meles Zenawi, it could be one of the powerhouses for Africa. And instead of being influenced and controlled by outside forces, it could help establish a peaceful settlement for the whole of the Horn of Africa. But that depends on the peoples of Ethiopia working together, which can be done as part of a federal setup, as I have supported for years. A federal arrangement is the only workable solution in Ethiopia.
So generally, how do you assess the status of the Ethiopian government, the strengths, and how do you forecast the coming 5 years to play out in Ethiopia? And also, what do you think of the political atmosphere in the Western nations? Like in the US, we are heading to election in 2024, end of 2024, November this year. And we never know who is going to be in office come January 2025. And I don't know if there is any election up in the UK. I came across some parliamentary elections, some party taken over. I don't know. So what do you think? How would the political changes that might happen in the West affect and the relationship between these nations and Ethiopia, and also the tolerance towards the brutality of the Ethiopian government and the Fano terrorist groups? What do you think would play out in the coming few years?
But this is all against the background of so-called democracies in the West drifting dangerously to the right with anti-immigrant, anti-refugee rhetoric. And the arch proponent of this is Donald Trump, of course. And if he gets into power in America, then the world will be a very unstable place. But we've seen drifts to the right wing, towards fascism, basically, in Europe, and even in the general election 2 days ago in the UK. We now have a party with members of parliament that is built around a sentiment of anti-immigration, and the so-called Reform Party. Many of us were delighted with the getting rid of the Tory party. It's the worst election for the Tories since for hundreds of years, and that is, they deserve that. But the expense has been that other parties have tolerated the xenophobia of the Tories, and we've seen this in Holland and Belgium as well, and Austria. Yeah, there is a shift to the right, and this is dangerous. Well, I'm not a historian, but I'm worried that the forces of fascism will again rear their head in Europe. So I'm pessimistic in terms of the drift towards refugees and people who aren't born in your country, if you see what I mean. And the fact that, despite the fact that everybody knows what's happening in terms of climate change, there is no cooperation in dealing with it. We're a species with huge amount of intelligence, and we know what needs to be done, but we haven't got the capacity somehow to cooperate to make those necessary changes. So internationally, I'm a bit despondent, but you only look at one lifetime, don't you? And my brief span is tiny in terms of the overall changes of things. So it could be that things will improve enormously, and I hope they do. In terms of the Horn of Africa, I'm worried, but there is great potential. The Oromo are in a much better position than they've been for over a century or 2 centuries, and there is great hope there. I think that because of the traditional, the DNA of the Oromo is democracy with the Gada system, and I think if that is allowed by the evil forces that charge in the world at the moment, if that is allowed to take over in Ethiopia, then there could be a positive wave of democracy happening, emanating from Ethiopia through the whole of the Horn of Africa, and hopefully further afield than that. But it's in the balance. But I think the Oromo are better poised now than they've been, well, since 2018, when Abiy Ahmed ruined it all. But that could be reversed. It'll take generations now with the damage he's done to the economy, but the social evolution within people's thinking of Ethiopia has great potential. So we should not lose hope and take some succor from the fact that there is potential for great improvement.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure if you could hear us, could hear me. Probably I was muted.
It's open to the audience than me.
Yeah. Thanks so much for taking time from your morning and speaking with me today on FNN. And thanks so much also for leading and directing Oromia Support Group that has been consistently documenting and compiling and reporting on the human rights violations that are being perpetrated by the Ethiopian government forces and the Fano Amhara militants. And with that, I think will take us to the conclusion of our today's program. If there is any message that you want to say at the end of our program, I will give you a couple of more minutes.
Very simply, thank you very much. And one phrase really, Jabatu Belisuma Tufajira.
Thanks so much, Dr. Trevor. Appreciate that. Yes, Belisuma Tufajira, which is translated to freedom is coming. And I believe freedom is coming, and so much young Oromo boys and girls are being sacrificing their life to end the brutality against our people, and they are more than ever very resolved, and they are paying heavy prices in their own blood and soul to get these people free from this subjugation. And the atrocities that are being committed against them by those who come to power in Ethiopia and those who are vying to get to power. And for sure, in a few years, I believe the situation of the Oromo people will improve, and the people would be will determine their own fate and destiny. And I believe that's going to happen. So I agree with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Daniel.
With that, we conclude our today's program. Our viewers, thanks so much for staying with us. If you have any comment or question, feel free to send us. Use our social media handles that are being displayed at the bottom of our program. Thanks so much.